Welcome back, Thresholds and Transits. My name is Megan. We are talking about Vesta square Uranus today. The flame the system cannot hold. First, let's talk about Vesta, and then I'll talk a little bit about me and this channel, and then we'll get on with the transit. So before we get into the degrees, let's talk about Vesta, because Vesta is one of the most misrepresented bodies in popular astrology, and the misrepresentation matters for understanding what this transit is actually doing. The standard account is that Vesta is the goddess of the hearth, the domestic flame, the gentle, tending, self-sacrificing energy of devotion. She is often described in modern astrology as the asteroid of focus, of sacred service, of the quiet keeper of the fire. And that account isn't exactly wrong, but it is incomplete in ways that serve the same patriarchal narrative it thinks it's departing from. So here's where tradition actually records. Vesta was not a domestic goddess in the modern sense. She was the goddess of the sacred flame at the center of Rome itself. It wasn't a household fire, it was the fire, the one that, if it went out, Rome fell. Her priestesses, the Vestal Virgins, held legal and social power that almost no other woman in Rome possessed. Mary Beard wrote in a 1980 paper called The Sexual Status of the Vestal Virgins in the Journal of Roman Studies, documents this precisely. The Vestals could own property, make wills, give testimony in court without an oath, move freely through public space, and command the crowd's silence at public events. They were buried alive for breaking their vows, not because virginity was precious, but because their sovereignty was understood as the structural foundation of Rome's survival. The punishment tells you exactly just how much power they held. And the word virgin, in the original sense, does not mean sexually abstinent. It meant belonging to no one. A virgin goddess was a sovereign goddess, one whose power was not mediated through a husband, a father, or a patron. It was one whose power was not, it was in service to no one. It was tended to because it was sacred, because it was the center, because it was the thing that could not go out. Demetra George in Asteroid Goddesses frames Vesta as the natal chart, as the sacred devotion that belongs to no one. The practice, the creative work, the commitment you maintain, not because you were told to, but because it is constitutive of who you are. The flame you would tend to even if no one was watching, even if no one approved, even if the structures around you reorganized and left you holding it all alone. That's the Vesta that is entering this square. And she's not a gentle keeper. She's not a martyr. She is the sovereign keeper, the one whose devotion is structurally, foundational, and personally ungovernable. If you are new here, my name is Megan. I am an astrology student, and as I'm learning about different aspects, as I'm learning about different things that are happening, I share them with you. And we all know the best way to learn is to teach. So I'm also building this channel, and I'm really glad that you're here. I have something that's available, also a part of my education, is donation-based readings. Now, if you've heard this before, stay tuned because I changed a little bit. On my website, which is meganriley.eu, there is an astrology tab. And on the astrology tab, there are two choices. One is donation-based natal chart readings, which is we talk for an hour about your natal chart, about your astrology chart. And I could talk for much longer than an hour. Sometimes the notes that I have are worth of 3 hours, but we schedule an hour for that. And I accept a donation since I don't feel comfortable charging you as I'm still a student. And the second piece I just added yesterday, so I'm very excited about, and that is donation-based transit readings. So if you have something particular that you're looking at, that you want to know about. If you see something, if you see a transit coming, you're trying to understand, or if you're looking for a good date, a date for a job or a move or a wedding or a divorce, right? You're looking for a good date for something. You're looking for something that is beneficial for you. We can do a transit reading. Now, keep in mind, I am a student and I'll do my very best with it, but I'm excited to be able to offer that. I live in Central European time, and I open up times all throughout the day and night to make things convenient no matter where you are. And if you still can't find anything, just send me an email to megan@meganriley.eu and we will figure something out. Okay, so transit, section 2, the transit. So Vesta, today I'm recording this on Monday, the 9th of March. You're going to see this on Wednesday. And today Vesta is at 29 degrees of Aquarius. On Wednesday, she will be at 0 degrees. And she is squaring Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus. So in the Thema Mundi, the foundational world chart of Hellenistic astrology, Aquarius is the 8th house. It's Saturn's nocturnal domicile. It's the house of death and transformation, shared resources, and the structures that have to break in order for something new to become possible. This is harsh. It's the house where the terms of the 7th house contract, the partnership, the agreement, the binding are revealed to be insufficient. And the 8th house is where you find out what something actually costs. Vesta in that house is the sovereign flame being tended in the place of necessary endings. While everything else changes, the flame cannot go out. In the 8th house of the world chart, that flame is surrounded by exactly what changes: transformation, dissolution, the death of what was shared. Taurus is the 11th house in the Thema Mundi, Venus's home. She's her night home, the house of community and alliances and friends and collective resources. Taurus as a sign carries the signification of the material, the embodied of it's what was built slowly with others over time. The 11th house in the Hellenistic tradition is the house of good fortune and the collective bonds that make good fortune possible. It's where Jupiter is the most happy. Uranus is in that house at 27 degrees Taurus and has been there for years. It reorganizes, it ruptures. Sometimes it's surprising, sometimes it's shocking. And in the house of community and material alliance, it has been doing just that to our collective structures that we depend on, not to mention what it's doing for us individually. The square between them is a 90-degree aspect of friction and tension. Demetra George, in Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, describes the square as one aspect that forces action. It cannot be ignored. It demands something be done with the tension that it generates. It's not a soft aspect. It is a confrontation between two things that cannot be reconciled without cost. In the modern tradition, Uranus is associated with Aquarius, which means Uranus is squaring the sign it rules. And let's just add the modern layer here, because rather than just the classical one, Hellenistically, Aquarius is Saturn's house. And the traditional read is Saturn ruled Vesta square Uranus in Venus's house. But the modern affinity adds just a little bit of layer that I wanted to add here. The disruption isn't foreign to the system because Uranus is native to Aquarius. The force reorganizing the patriarchal structures in some sense is native to the structure, the system itself. The disruption was always there inside the system. Silvia Federici says this dynamic in Caliban and the Witch. The enclosure of the commons in early modern Europe was not simply imposed from the outside. The internal contraindications of communal life, of the system, of the patriarchal life emerging under capitalism, made the enclosure impossible. The system contained the forces of its own reorganization. Vesta square Uranus is that dynamic this week. So the cost of tending the flame. James Baldwin wrote in an essay in 1962 called The Creative Process. It's brilliant. It's one of my favorite pieces of writing ever. It is one of the most precise descriptions of what Vesta in the 8th house square Uranus in the 11th actually feels like, but from the inside. His argument is that the artist, the devotional practitioner, the keeper of whatever flame they can't put down, it's not a special category of person. They are a person who cannot avoid seeing what the society needs to avoid seeing. The devotion is not a choice in the sense of preference. I want to do this. I don't want to do this. It is a compulsion. And the system organized around its comfortable myths, its necessary fictions, its shared agreements about what is and what is not visible, it finds that compulsion destabilizing. So the flame, it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to announce itself. The problem is not that the keeper of the flame is confrontational. The problem is that the flame itself illuminates the things that the patriarchy has agreed to not look at. And just that is enough. That's sufficient to generate the friction of this square. I'll say it one more time. The problem is that the flame itself illuminates the things that the patriarchy has agreed to not look at. And that causes the square. So Vesta in Aquarius in the 8th house is the flame held within the patriarchy's own structures, within its systems, its shared knowledge, its communal knowledge, its containers. And the devotion, the flame, is not private in the sense of hidden. It's embedded into the patriarchy's own body. And Uranus and Taurus in the 11th is the reorganization of that body, the rupture of the material and the relational foundations that the flame was resting on. Baldwin goes further. He says, the artist is dangerous to the community, to the patriarchy, not because the artist wants to destroy the patriarchy, but because the patriarchy senses correctly that genuine, creative devotion will not allow the myths to be unseen. It will not allow the myths to remain undisturbed. The flame keeps burning, and it never negotiates with the darkness around it. It just keeps going. And so then the system, the patriarchy, reorganizes itself. It doesn't always attack. Sometimes it just shifts. The platform changes. The movement fractures. The organization that held the work dissolves or transforms into something that doesn't have room for the flame anymore. Uranus in the 11th doesn't always arrive as destruction. Sometimes it's a drift. Sometimes it's the slow recognition that the system has moved and the flame stayed. Audre Lorde gives us the other half of this in the uses of the erotic, collected in Sister Outsider. She says, the erotic is not about sexuality in the narrow sense of sexuality. It is the deepest knowledge that we have something that is real. The felt sense that what we are doing matters, that it's worth doing. The work that we're doing is worth doing, and that the flame is worth tending. She writes that we've been taught to distrust that knowledge, to separate it from the serious work of surviving and building and cutting wood and chopping water, and as if the knowing that what we're doing matters doesn't matter, and to treat it as decoration or distraction. Vesta's flame in this framework is Lorde's erotic. It's the devotion that knows itself from the inside, that does not require external validation to keep going. It persists not because it's been permitted to exist, but because it is real. That's what makes it threatening to the patriarchy, that it requires permission structures in order to function, because this doesn't need permission. A devotion that knows its own validity without needing the community's approval is ungovernable. That's precisely the way that Uranus governs, by reorganizing everything around it rather than being reorganized itself. So the square between them this week names the cost. There's no failure of devotion. There's no wrongness of the flame. The cost of holding something real in a period when the system structures that we were supposed to hold alongside you are being violently and rapidly reorganized. The cost of holding something real while everything around you is falling apart. Federici's historical analysis says this structural rather than personal. In Caliban and the Witch, she traces back how the witch trials targeted women whose devotional and healing practices were embedded in communal life. The herbalist, the midwife, the woman whose knowledge was the community's knowledge. The enclosure of the commons did not just take the land, it dismantled the structures within which all those devotional practices had meaning and protection. Vesta square Uranus is the transit of that dismantling. The flame is real, and the system it depended on is being reorganized. Baldwin is also clear that the flame doesn't go out. The creative devotion, the erotic knowledge that Lorde names, the sacred practice that Vesta carries, these are not destroyed by the patriarchy's reorganization. They become solitary for a time, more costly, more obviously at odds with the structures around them. And that friction, the friction of the square, is also the pressure that clarifies what the devotion actually is. What are you willing to stand for, really? Even if you have to hide it, what are you going to hold? What are you going to hold as true and real? And it's stripped of the comfortable assumption that the community will hold it, that the system will protect it, that the system will protect you. What if it's not popular anymore? What if you aren't validated anymore? Are you still going to stand there? So let's be specific about what this looks like this week. The artist communities that were built on particular platforms, particular funding structures, particular organizational models are fracturing. The independent creative economy that Uranus and Taurus spent years building and then reorganizing is in another reorganization. The communities that formed around specific devotional practices, specific political commitments, specific ways of making and sharing work are discovering that the material and the relational foundations those communities rested on are shifting again. The mutual aid networks, the independent media outlets, the activist organizations that build their infrastructure on particular platforms and funding models, the academic communities whose devotion to knowledge is embedded in institutional structures now under political assault. The Kennedy Center. These are all Vesta in the 8th house, square Uranus in the 11th. The flame is real, and everything's being reorganized. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, writing in Her Land in 1915, imagined a society organized entirely around collective devotion to nurturing life, where the sacred work of tending was not privatized into individual households, but held communally, structurally, in the center of everything. What Uranus and Taurus has been dismantling in the 11th house is that exactly kind of imagined common life, the collective structures within which devotional work has meaning and protection. This is also visible in the bodies of individual practitioners. The writer who has maintained a practice through multiple platform collapses, Everyone's switching over to Substack right now. The healer whose community has fractured along political lines. The teacher whose institution no longer recognizes the work they came there to do. The organizer whose movement has splintered. These aren't personal failures. They're a precise description of Vesta in the 8th house square Uranus in the 11th. The sovereign flame held through the reorganization of the community that was supposed to hold it. The question that this transit asks isn't whether the flame survives. Baldwin and Lorde are both clear that it does. The flame always survives. The question is, what do you discover about the devotion when the community no longer holds it for you? When it's no longer popular? When the structure around it is gone? What remains when the external validation, the platform, the organization, the movement, the support, the funding, strips away? What the flame actually is when you are holding it just yourself. And for you, what is it that you're holding that everything has changed around, that maybe isn't as popular? What is it that you're willing to stand for, even if it is in hiding, no matter what? So let's look at horoscopes. We'll do quick horoscopes, and they're Thema Mundi based. So we're starting with Cancer rising. We do these horoscopes with Cancer rising in the Thema Mundi. Cancer is the ascendant of the world chart. The moon rises first. This is where we begin every time. Find your rising sign and listen for where Aquarius and Taurus fall in your chart. Those are the two houses in friction this week. Cancer rising. Aquarius is your 8th house, Taurus your 11th. This is the transit as described through the Thema Mundi directly. The sovereign flame held in your shared resources, your deepest bonds, your necessary transformations, is in direct friction with the reorganization of your community and your alliances. You feel this structurally this week. What you are devoted to at the level of your most binding commitments is being pressured by the rupture of your collective networks. Leo rising. Aquarius is in your 7th house, Taurus your 10th. Vesta in your 7th is the sacred devotion held within partnership and committed relationship. Uranus in your 10th is disrupting your public vocation and your reputation. The flame you tend in your most intimate bonds is in friction with the structural reorganization of your career and public life. Something you committed to privately is at odds with what your public life is asking of you. Virgo rising. Aquarius is your 6th house, Taurus your 9th house. The flame is your daily practice, your body, your labor, your service. Uranus is disrupting your philosophy, your higher learning, your relationship to foreign places, and sacred truth. The devotion embedded in your daily work is in friction with the reorganization of your entire worldview. What you do every day and what you believe about why you do it are being pulled in two separate directions. Libra rising. Aquarius is your 5th house, Taurus your 8th. The flame is your creative work, your generative expression, what you produce and take pleasure in. Uranus is disrupting your 8th house of transformation, shared resources, and necessary endings. The devotion to what you create is in friction with the structural reorganization of your deepest bonds and your shared foundations. The creative work is clarifying what the intimate bonds that you have actually cost you. Scorpio rising. Aquarius is your 4th house, Taurus your 7th. The flame is held in your home, your roots, your private interior life, the foundation that no one sees. Uranus is disrupting your partnerships and open relationships. The devotion embedded in your most private foundation is in friction with the reorganization of your most visible commitments. What you tend to in private is structurally at odds with what your partnerships are demanding of you. Sagittarius rising. Aquarius is your 3rd house, Taurus your 6th. The flame is your communication, your local environment, your voice, and immediate community. Uranus is disrupting your daily practice, your body, and your labor. The devotion to your voice and immediate relationships is in friction with the reorganization of how you work and maintain your physical life. What you have to say and the conditions under which you can say are in tension with each other. Capricorn rising. You're on Aquarius as your second house, Taurus your fifth. The flame is your resources, your livelihood, what you value, and what sustains you materially. Uranus is disrupting your creative work, your pleasures, and what you generate. The devotion to your material foundation is in friction with the reorganization of your creative life. The economics of the work and the work itself are pulling against each other. Aquarius rising. Aquarius is your first house, Taurus your fourth. This square lands between your identity and your home, your body and your foundation. Vesta is in your first is the flame held in your body and your sense of self. Uranus in your fourth is disrupting your roots, your family, your private foundation. The devotion that is constitutive of who you are is in direct friction with the reorganization of how and where you belong. This is one of the most personally activated placements for this transit. Pisces rising. Aquarius is your 12th house, Taurus your third. The flame is hidden, held in your 12th house of solitude, retreat, and what operates beneath the surface of your visible life. Uranus is disrupting your communication, your local environment, and your voice. The devotion you tend in private is in friction with the reorganization of how you speak and connect in your immediate world. Something you've been tending unseen is being pressured to become speakable. Aries rising. Aquarius is your 11th house, Taurus your second. The flame is your community and collective alliances. Uranus is disrupting your personal resources and livelihood. The devotion that you have invested in networks and collective structures is in friction with the reorganization of what actually sustains you materially. The community and the economics of your life are in direct tension this week. Taurus rising. Aquarius is your 10th, Taurus your first. Vesta in your 10th is the sacred devotion you carry in your public vocation, your visible work in the world. Uranus in your first is in your own sign, disrupting your identity and your body's orientation. The flame of your public calling is in friction with the fundamental reorganization of who you are. What you are called to do publicly and who you are becoming personally are not yet resolved. And Gemini rising. Aquarius is your 9th house, Taurus your 12th. The flame you tend in philosophy, higher learning, and the search for sacred truth is square to the disruption happening in your 12th house of solitude, hidden enemies, and what operates unseen. What you are devoted to knowing is in friction with what Uranus is reorganizing beneath the surface of your visible life. The search for truth and the private undoing are happening together. So, Vesta square Uranus, the sovereign flame, the system cannot hold any longer. Baldwin said that the artist cannot stop seeing what the society needs to not see. Lorde said the erotic, the deep knowing that what you are doing is real, that what you are doing is worth doing, is the source. It's not the decoration. The square doesn't extinguish the flame. It clarifies the flame. It strips away the assumption that the system will hold it no matter what. And it leaves you with the thing itself, the devotion, the practice, the power, the erotic, the sacred work that was real before the structure validated it and was around it and will remain real after. So the real question is, What is that thing? What is that thing that is worth holding no matter what happens around it? No matter what happens, if the validation is gone, if the structure is gone, if the platform is gone, what is that thing that is important enough, that is devotional enough to you, that is worth doing? What is that?